IDBM Challenge, Season 1, Episode 2. You might remember him from his flamboyant clothes, but in today's episode, Katharina discusses with him topics such as courage and compassion and what it means to live a good life.
Firstly, thank you so much that I can come around to your studio and I'm warmly welcomed here. I'm really happy about it.
It's great to have you here.
And we gave you also have some insights about the IDBM studies, about the...
Sure, yes. Of course, I've followed it over the years, and every now and then I would have students that have been there or are in there, and I think it's a great program. I think it's the kind of thing that if you think about Aalto as something where people with different backgrounds meet and go about making great things and have an impact on the world. So IDBM was Aalto before Aalto, and I believe in that kind of collaborative, multidisciplinary, multi-method oriented approach, which also is looking for impact rather than just describing things or explaining things, having an actual impact.
Yeah, that's great. It's at least to me, it's encouraging that somebody with such a background is actually saying, "Hey, that's a good thing you're working on, and it's a good approach you're investigating into to make the world maybe a pinch better."
Yeah, and you know, I'm accustomed to the idea or fact that I'm old, but the fact that I am old means that I've already lived through several decades. But that means I can look back to those decades and to appreciate more and more the fact that whatever valuable has emerged in the case of my own life has emerged as a result of being in contact with quite diverse kind of people, as compared to myself, quite different, as compared to one another, quite different. It's the human diversity that I think it's absolutely the core of the magic that can happen through us as people. But that means that you have to, I think, open yourself to that possibility. It doesn't happen automatically. It does help, however, if you have, as it were, a structure that helps you to do so, as is the case with IDBM. It gives a structure for people to get together, although they might have diverse backgrounds in the context of doing something together. But generally speaking, the attitude of openness, the willingness to understand somebody who acts, who speaks, whose manners are different from yours, I think is so beneficial, and it also opens channels within yourself that you might not have realized you had in the first place.
That's true. And out of my own experience, I know when you come to IDBM, there are students from all over the world, and some of them just arrived the day before the course starts, and now they are facing big challenges in these multidisciplinary, multicultural teams. And some of them are quite lost, or everybody is in an ambiguous environment. What do you have, like a point of view or an attitude which you think could be enriching for these moments when you come into such situations?
Well, I think one word that might be useful is sort of like the word of being freely pulsating. You allow yourself to pulsate with whatever is taking place, and you try to find the rhythm of the situation, which means that you to some extent allow yourself to forget yourself, that you are not so conscious of yourself, but that perhaps orient yourself to open yourself to whatever is taking place outside of yourself. And it's because in the kind of society and context of IDBM and more broadly Finland, it's pretty secure to throw yourself and allow yourself to surf on whatever is taking place. Personally, I believe very much in psychological safety, so I believe it's important to facilitate psychological safety in the contexts that we create together. So that also means, from the point of view of the individual, that I think it's important to look at other people as individuals from the point of view of benevolence and from the point of view of good faith and believe that we can do something good together.
Doing something good together, also maybe doing something good to yourself, because if you are not good to yourself, how can you be good to others? I personally struggled when I came here to position myself in that situation. I remember your words in a lecture, they supported me very much about how to perceive myself. I would love if you share these, like some of your thoughts also to the new students.
Can you remember what were my words?
Yes.
In that particular lecture?
So in this lecture, it was my first lecture at Aalto, and you were saying a person has like, I think 40,000 thoughts per day. I don't nail me down on this one now. And you can decide what you think, like, and how you think about yourself. So do you think very self-critical or not?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I'm glad that has stayed with you. The idea that we, of course, do have thousands and thousands of thoughts each day, but it could be that those thoughts repeat themselves. It could be that they have a pattern about them. It could be that they have a tone that doesn't really serve us. But we also have the capability as human beings to take, as it were, the helicopter view regarding our own thoughts. And challenge our own thoughts to be in a slightly different direction as compared to what they might be automatically, in terms of the tone, in terms of the coloring, in terms of kind of nuances that they bring forth. And most certainly the amount of positivity there is in our thoughts, to some extent at least, is up to us to decide. So you can direct your thoughts, for instance, be more respectful and more wonder-oriented and more curious about whatever is taking place than might be the case automatically. But that means that you direct yourself to what's happening outside of yourself. So getting as they're too much stuck with oneself, I think is not serving us. But it might easily happen, particularly to people that feel that they are artistic, creative, they have something to say. So it can be that people want to, as they announce themselves very strongly in new contexts. I believe that's not working the best way to the best of even the individual in contexts such as IDBM. I think it's very, very important to orient yourself to others and listen to others and also encourage others to be more what they could be at their best.
For students, for others within the team. Now, there will sometimes be minutes or situations where people just don't know where to go, like they don't know where to start and where the heck do we start with this project, or how can we be creative on this minute, or there might be a conflict coming up between also these different patterns of communication, like when an extrovert German discusses with a more implicit French person, that will always go into two different directions at the end. So the understanding and communication patterns are very different in the countries. How would you approach such a topic?
I think the main point there is to be curious about the other one, irrespective of how the other one seems to act or seems to react, and assume that there is some good intention behind there that might not come across accurately. So it could be that I'm misled in my interpretation of the other one, when my thoughts turn negative, because in a human being, thoughts can very easily turn negative. We are very sensitive to things we find irritating or things we might find threatening, and that happens very easily at the subconscious level, and then surfaces as something that we believe actually is the case. And then we rationalize our own reaction basis of the surface, as opposed to the depth element within ourselves, the emotion that drove us to that kind of irritated conclusion of the other person or his style. In general, I think it relates to style. So it's important, I think, to penetrate to the other person's style, towards the inner beauty that there is, and in that effort, I think it's useful if you manage to believe yourself that there is that beauty in the person, and you sort of try to search for it, try to encourage it to come out.
It's almost a humble approach, but also a very explorative approach.
That's right. That's very well put. Yes, humble and exploratory at the same time. I think that's also it's sort of opposite to Trump approach. So believing that the life's miracle primarily is outside of you. That's the point. And if that is the case, that the miracle of life primarily is outside of you, it's natural to sort of not emphasize your own perspective or your own voice as the primary element of the miracle.
But if I listen to this, is also the word which comes into my mind is resonance. So of course, like if I'm exploring the other people in the room and I try to also mirror that to my values, my expectations or whatever, not whatever, but well, values and expectation maybe, or also ideas which you want to also share with others to make them flourish. Now, so the word resonance comes up for me in my mind. I sometimes wonder, okay, as I said before, there are these communication patterns and mentalities, codes also out there which not everybody understands. Now let's say you have a situation where you get almost no resonance at all. So it's basically like a black hole. Whatever you put in there and nothing resonates back. That might be a tricky situation, but it might happen. How to explore that?
Well, if you have a situation with zero resonance, I think it's, first of all, a very unusual situation. It still might happen, but I don't think it brings out the core truth of those people with whom you, for whatever reason, share that zero resonance situation. And anyway, from the point of view of the individual, I think it's always important to think, what could you do differently to make the situation somehow move, to make the situation somehow unfold into something more beautiful. And also people are so strongly connected with one another on the cell level, that there's always so much that can happen without us consciously aiming at that something happening. That it's, I think, wise to try to make to something consciously to happen, that then ultimately when it happens involves a lot of non-conscious elements, all kinds of emotional elements. And it's the intention to reach out to the other person, to respect the other person, that I think is the core there. Respect. Mm-hmm. So developing one's muscles for respect, I think is extremely important. This is what I try to create myself a forum for in the context of my teaching in the context of my lectures. So my effort is not to try to teach some particular content to people, but rather to create a context where people could feel themselves as respecting something, and that's kind of like exercising one's respect muscle. But then you might also capture yourself doing so and then reflect upon what it might involve, which is the reflective dimension in us, and then perhaps capture some of those aspects of you and thus be able to carry it further in the future more lightly than otherwise would happen.
Mm-hmm. And when reflecting, and you said before the bird eye perspective to take this, of course it's not very maybe personal aspect of it, but how important do you think, especially in our world where we have meeting after meeting and your phone is always blinking with some message, how important do you think it is to actually take some time off and to actually have this headspace to have a look at the bird perspective, take a step back?
I think it's absolutely important that we realize the disruptions as disruptions to something deep that is happening to us in the dimension of what's best in us. So if we are constantly disrupted by mechanical means, I believe it means that we are not going to grow to the dimensions we could grow. We need to pay attention to what's actually there with us there and then, more than we might do automatically. And that means that we have to switch off the equipment in the situation where we are with one another, and also strengthen our abilities to be present, and therefore to also experience ourselves as creatures that are present when we are present, and how great it feels, and what kind of exploring possibilities to the fascinating dimensions of the other person or the situation that creates.
My thoughts might be drifting. Tell me if it's too much. But it brings me to another aspect. Now let's say we are now even implementing this remote communication. Like, well, we have it on private basis, but also now on professional level. That you, like your family lives in a completely different country, your work colleagues, you have never met them really. Now there the technical interruption is actually needed to, maybe that's a pointless thought I have there, I don't know. Maybe I'm after creating presence in a remote context, that's even like a new challenge almost, like.
Sure.
But maybe it also goes too far.
Yeah, but you know, if you, let's say, talk over the phone with somebody who is in some other country, I mean, that's pretty much like you are connected with the person, but only part of the sensors that you would have as a human being are in use, but still you can be present with that somebody, even with those only partly activated sensors in use. Mm. But the challenge is if you are at the same time as you are talking with the person, also checking your emails or WhatsApp messages, that's not going to work in terms of the presence dimension. It's multitasking, I think, is a bad idea as a rule. Mm. But it's particularly bad if you want to connect with another human being, no matter what the channel is. Mm. It can be as a very heavily technical channel, but still there's the possibility to be more present or less present. And the best way is to reach out to more presence.
Mm. Yeah. I'm sorry I drifted. It was not on the agenda, but it's interesting. Oh. These shoes are hot.
Are they?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
They're good for winter.
They are primarily used during fall. It's colder.
Yeah, but Finnish houses are so warm. It's okay.
Yeah. Finnish houses are properly built. That's true.
Yeah, don't argue there now. I won't. At least the old houses, yes. They are. Yeah. Do you have, like, in this context we have been talking, do you have a thought which you would like to share, which you would like to add, where I'm just too dumb to ask for now, or too blind? I don't know.
Well, let me pick up from there and just indicate one point that I think is quite important when we think about our lives. I think it's important when we think about our lives also to allow ourselves to go deeply enough to concrete instances and concrete experiences in our life. In my case, I try to help people to do so by stories in the context of my lectures. There are often quite a lot of stories there. And the idea of those stories is to give a platform through the story for the participants' own stories. So they hopefully, as it were, trigger some associations, some memories. The person is reminded of something that he or she might have forgotten. And then that might lead the person to experience, let's say, the beauty of one's love for nature, let's say, or one's respect for one's grandparents and the sacrifices they perhaps did, let's say, in the Second World War. And it's that kind of approach where we engage with ourselves, in this case through our storytelling dimension. But university education and pedagogy often don't activate that dimension. IDBM to some extent might be an exception because there's so much good work and so much things that are not just, as it were, taught and learned or internalized. It's some sort of doing by learning by doing very much there in IDBM. But generally speaking, in university context, the cognitive dimension easily dismisses the narrative aspects of life and therefore the narrative muscles within us. But in my case, I try to bring those back to the teaching situation and to the lecture situation, and it's something that time and again I found so rewarding. Also, when I personally managed to go back to something that I've experienced and find new nuances, new aspects into something, and it's because ultimately many of the key themes in life are not that many. It's just a few things basically that everything is all about. It's about love, it's about respect, it's about finishing things, it's about carrying responsibility, understanding the whole. It's just a few themes basically, but it's the experience of those fundamental themes that doesn't happen automatically. And our time is not easy in that respect because there are all kinds of attractions to what are basically surface phenomena that can sort of just suck us in to the black hole of the insignificant. But of course, a human being is wondrous. I mean, we are miracles. So we ought to explore that and we ought to bring that forth to the benefit of others. And the first step is reaching out to others and trying to enrich ourselves through that experience of others.
Yeah, it triggers on me to also find a focus, because you are right, there are zillions of attractions out there, and as you said, finish what you started to actually, even though it might not seem beneficial for the moment, maybe just go that pinch further to experience. Maybe it opens up a new world after the deep hole, and but I also believe it needs focus to do so. So you have to also take some decisions. You cannot have 5 jobs in a row or 5 projects running in one go, especially with IDBM students. I've experienced it myself. You take afterwards all the minor studies and you want to see this and that and this and that, and at the end you're very much overloaded. There is no time for word perspective at the very end. It might be also important to think, where do I investigate my time?
Yeah, you know, in the Beatles song "Hey Jude," there is, I think, this great line: "The movement you need is on your shoulder." That initially, when Paul McCartney had written the song and he performed it for the first time to John and Yoko, as he was playing that particular place in the song, he shouted to John, I have to change that, because he had already used the word shoulder earlier in the song, so he thought that it's repeating the word that is sort of clumsy. But John said, no, you're not going to change that. That's the best line in the whole song. The movement you need is on your shoulder. I think it's a deep truth. I mean, we shouldn't very often look for something that is in some remote other continent, but what we already have here. So it's sort of like the Finnish national composer Jean Sibelius' kind of approach to nature. He was extremely influenced by the Finnish nature, but for him, just walking 10 meters into the forest was enough. I mean, he wasn't that great a sort of explorer of the Finnish forest. It's just that he experienced the significance when he just saw the birds flying over and took some water from the lake and perhaps drank that water from the lake, that he experienced the mysterious, tremendous, magnificent strength of the Finnish nature. I think that's the right approach, to sort of look more mindfully to what's there nearby.
Yeah, look more mindfully. Very true. Maybe he was even inspired by the birds flying deeper into the forest. Yeah. What do you have, like, in the context of IDBM? Do you have like I mean, you already gave many thoughts to the students, like, I hope they will reflect on that and they will glue on this video and think about it, and that will trigger something in them which they carry through, as just as I did from your one lecture I listened to. But I mean, it's pretty remarkable to keep this for like so many years inside from one small lecture. And do you have something which you think is important to share with these students coming here, and being also from Finland? Like, many come from Finland, they might have even the responsibility to integrate the ones who are coming in. They might not, that's their own choice. But do you have one or two aspects?
Given the fact that an IDBM student is in Finland, I think the best idea is to make the best of the fact that you are in Finland in that program. It's if you were in Oxford, if you were in Shanghai, you know, it would be different an experience. UCLA in Los Angeles is where I went to. But the point is, if you are in Finland, there are things that you actually don't quite that easily would get access to, because Finland is such a small society. It's fairly compact, but that means that the scale of things, I think, is human. And it's the scale of things that is human in the context of a university that actually is emerging as we speak. It's not a ready-made university. Quite concretely, it's being built just now. So it's also a reminder of the fact that many of the routines, many of the ways of doing things are not fixed as yet. And that means that there's a lot of room for creative action. I think one should make use of that. and at the same time remember the key point, which is a human being as an individual is a miracle, but the miracle is a bigger miracle in the company of other miracles. So allowing oneself for that miracle in the context of even bigger miracles to emerge, I think that's the big point. And in a small country where there aren't that many, as there are overwhelming temptations. So you study in California and you see those Ferraris around all the time. You're naturally tempted to making money, for instance. It wouldn't be such a big temptation in Finland where you don't see Ferraris. So it's any context has its pluses and minuses, but I think it's absolutely the case that studying IDBM in Aalto University has tremendous pluses.
Yeah, it's a good ending, but I also feel like you have, what you said, explore the individual in front of you. I would even encourage explore also the university in front of you, because Aalto is a huge ecosystem full of rich content and rich sources, which actually are still very much needed to be explored, because a professor in Arabia may doesn't know about some source or some potential partner in Töölö. This will surely get, I hope so, get better in the new facilities where people are physically together in the space. But I think it would be also encouraging for the students to go out and also explore these silent ecosystem around them.
Yeah, also remembering the fact that in the Finnish context, very often things are not that pronounced. So it's not the profile that would stand out automatically of even the best things. So you need to hear also the more silent calls, and thereupon find some of the best things.
And the very fine silent calls. Yes.
Right.
I thank you for this, for me, enriching talk.
Thank you.
I hope for others as well. At least for the here and now, in the present, I very much appreciate the talk.
Thank you.
Kiitos.
Yes.